Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaelyn. I am a fifth year PhD candidate in history and African American studies at Yale, and I recently quit my 9-to-5 in order to focus on my dissertation and full-time content creation. And I asked my patrons over on Patreon to send me some questions for a little Q&A, and they did not hold back. There are a lot of questions here, so I figured that we would just do a nice kind of honest, chatty Q&A. I actually don't remember the last time I did a Q&A. I think it might have been during Vlogmas, so not terribly long ago, but I just thought it would be nice to come together and have a little chat. And I just filmed a rather heavy video about the news with, university professors leaving the United States, and I just wanted to film something a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. So we're gonna go ahead and answer these questions, and I just want to say a quick thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for submitting these questions. When I do Q&As in the future, that's where I'm going to do it. I also produce exclusive content. My VIP members get a community call once a month, as well as an exclusive video, and we have chat spaces and all of that. So if you're interested in checking it out, the link will be down below. But without further ado, we're going to start with Christine's question. How many books do you think you own, and who have you persuaded to store those that aren't in London? Oh brother. Okay, so I actually don't know how many books I own. So as you can see, I have a massive stack of books there. These are actually books that I'm trying to donate because I've either finished them or I've DNF'd them. But in terms of books that are currently on the bookcase, I would assume you probably have about, I don't know, 75 books per bookcase. Does that sound accurate? I feel like it can't be 100. But I would say I probably have in total maybe 300 or 400 books. We'll have to do a video actually counting them on my book channel at some point, because I do have, I think, 3 full boxes of books back in the United States. Back when I moved out of New Haven, my friend Danielle took 3 boxes back to her place in Pennsylvania, and those are actually getting shipped to me at some point this year. So once I have all the books here and I have to figure out how to organize them, which I have no idea how I'm going to do because those bookcases are completely full, then we can actually count them. Christine also asked, which historical period would you like to research after you finished your PhD? So that's actually a very good question. So I was having a conversation with someone the other day where they had asked, what my next research project is going to be. And I actually want to change subfields a little bit. Since the beginning of my proper academic career, and I marked that by the time I transferred to UCLA, I've really been focused on the history of slavery, early American founding. I have kind of emphasized the period between about 1560 to essentially 1789 and the drafting of the US Constitution. That's really my concentration of expertise. So early modern England, the Atlantic world, African American history, and the very early founding. But I would actually really like to produce a book or some kind of research on the historical profession and how that looks in the digital age. So I don't necessarily know what the specific project is, but I really want to create research on history in the digital age, the dissemination of historical knowledge on social media, something along those lines. So it's not a specific period of history that I think I would want to go into. It's just kind of like a subset of digital humanities, I suppose. However, I think I would like to continue working on early America in terms of the historical research that I would do. And based on this kind of moment in politics and in history, I'm feeling more pulled towards the early American founding again. I always feel like I get pulled back towards the American Revolution and the founding period when there is a moment of political strife, because oftentimes it's used as a vehicle for talking about nationalism and, building kind of nationalistic sentiment, and it's often done in such a way that is not actually true to the history. So that's what I feel pulled towards. That was a very long answer, but Now, Sita asked, coming from your post about returning to social media, reflecting on the time away from it, will you be making any changes to your consumption of social media as well as your focus on creating? So I made a post on Instagram. It was this one, if you want to check it out. But I have set a couple of rules for myself with social media. The first is that I actually unfollowed any account that I don't have some kind of personal connection to. I noticed that with social media, and especially my consumption of it in December, I was just watching a lot of content that made me feel like I needed to do something or I needed to buy something. One of the things that I found in leaving my job was that I had been consuming a lot of kind of entrepreneur content, creator economy based content, and it just doesn't align with where I'm at right now. Yes, I have that knowledge and, you know, I did work in that space. But right now, I really feel pulled towards supporting higher education and history-focused content. And so I just wanted to distance myself from a lot of that, you know, conversation, just because then it kind of like lights up the entrepreneur side of my brain. And right now I need that side of my brain to like shut up and allow me to write my dissertation. So I just unfollowed a lot of accounts that I didn't have any connection to, or that it was people that they felt like filler accounts that I was following. It was people that, you know, I maybe met like 3 years ago and I just haven't had any communication with since then. And so that was step one. Step two is that because of that, I also feel like my followed feed is just much more limited. And so when I click onto Instagram or TikTok, I go specifically to the accounts that I follow. So whether I'm going to Reels or I'm going on TikTok, I'm just going to the followed feed. Or if I do want to look at the For You page, that's fine, but there's a limitation on it. And I also have parameters around what time of day I am watching and consuming content. And what I have found is that with creating, it's much easier for me in the evening to create, and I just feel like more inspired, I suppose. It's been better for me to have access in the evenings because during the day when I would scroll and get kind of consumed by it, I feel too stressed about the other work that I need to be doing that I don't create, I just scroll. Whereas in the evening, for some reason, I feel like there isn't anything I necessarily need to do on my computer, so I can go ahead and create. And yeah, I just don't feel like I sit and spiral as much. Susie asked, ooh, what were your expectations when you started your YouTube? Did you expect to make an income from it? Has it turned out the way you expected it to? What has surprised you about the journey? That's a very good question. Okay, we're gonna spill some serious tea. I started my YouTube channel actually several years before I started taking it seriously. I have a couple of random vlogs from like 2018, but in the summer of 2019, I committed to it and I said I'm gonna post one video a week. I'm gonna get used to it. I'm gonna get comfortable on camera so that I can document my experience at Oxford. But one thing that I haven't really shared is that I was doing it with strategy in mind. So I actually wrote out an entire business plan for the creation of what eventually became Accepted Consulting. And I wish I had that notebook with me here, but I think it's in a box back in the States. But it essentially laid out the type of content I was going to make. It had like the general pillars of content I wanted to produce and the types of services I wanted to offer. So I knew that you could make an income on YouTube, but I assumed I wouldn't make a significant income until after my PhD was done. So I basically had put in my mind that it was going to take about 6 or 7 years for it to make a full-time income. Now, what I will say is that the YouTube channel itself does not make a full-time income in any way, shape, or form. It might have been possible for it to make a full-time income back in 2022, but money as a creator has been really challenging over the last couple of years. Just AdSense is down, brand deals, they don't want to pay as much. They also don't really focus on YouTube content as much as they do short form video content. And so I have just found it really difficult to create relationships with brands. And so, yes, I did expect to earn an income at some point. I did not realize I was going to be earning an income within, I think it was a year of starting my YouTube channel, and I didn't make a serious income on YouTube until I think 2 or 3 years on the platform, but that was my best year. So like 2022, 2023 was when I made the most money on YouTube, and I have not been able to reach those numbers even close since. And that is strictly YouTube, so it's not talking accepted consulting. So accepted consulting, I actually never pulled a direct income from. I just had the money in order to self-sustain the business, as well as to pay for things like travel. So whenever I would go back to California, I would be meeting up with Katie, or I would be doing work that related to accepted. And so, for example, accepted consulting would pay for my flights. The answer is yes, I did expect to make an income. As it turned out, as I expected it to. The thing that I found the most surprising about YouTube over the years are the relationships that I would not have if it weren't for YouTube. Basically, all of my closest friendships are thanks to YouTube. Katie, I would not know without YouTube. Danielle, Kate, my friend Elizabeth, Becca. Like, there's so many people in my life now that are my best friends that I would not know. And I just feel like my life would be so much more lonely and would not be nearly as fulfilling if I didn't have this way of connecting with people. That, I think, is what surprised me most about it, was because I didn't really factor, you know, possible friendships and relationships and that kind of thing into what you would get out of it. And I also didn't expect that I would feel as creative. I never really considered myself a terribly artistic person, but I really love the artistic element of creating and editing videos. I hope that that shows, because I really take a lot of time to think about B-roll and angles and how it is that I'm really curating my content. And I do that because it's really just kind of stimulating. It's really exciting for my brain to have that to play with. And so that's also another part that kind of surprised me. Susie also asked, as someone who attended community college first, what surprised you about being a student at more prestigious academic institutions? What was the transition like? I feel like I still have so much imposter syndrome. And when I say imposter syndrome, what I personally mean by that is I feel like I somehow bamboozled the admissions committees at UCLA, at Oxford, and at Yale to let me in. But one way that I try to combat that is to just tell myself, well, you know what, then they're the ones that made the mistake. I might as well just take advantage of it and enjoy the ride while it's available to me. However, the transition to UCLA was not that challenging. I found it was very academically rigorous, and I think the quality of the writing that they expected was a bit of an adjustment. But the biggest transition to me, I would say, was when I got to Yale. The thing that I felt insecure about and still feel very insecure about is that a lot of my peers went to Ivy League institutions in undergrad and had a quality of education that I didn't feel like I had, and that has benefited their writing. I think that you can make it from any starting place, and where I started is valid. But I did find that I felt and still feel several steps behind them, because I just don't feel like my writing and my research skills and my ability to publish and my confidence are nearly at the same level as my peers. I guess the part that I find difficult about having had the background in community college is, like, I still always feel like I'm playing catch up. Lindy asked, I'm starting my bachelor's in history in September. What are your tips and tricks, and would you recommend doing historical research? First and foremost, absolutely I recommend doing historical research. In terms of my tips and tricks, so one of the things that I think is most important for people that want to study history is to actually reach out for support and communicate with your instructors. I mentioned this in my How to Become an Academic Weapon video, or I think it's Your Academic Redemption, or can't remember what the title was. We so often do our work secluded, but the work of history is the work of storytelling. And that is best done in community. It's best done in communication with others. So I would say when you start your program, go to your TA's office hours, talk to your professors, talk to your classmates, and just constantly like engage in those questions about history, because I think that's the best part. And I also think that that's where the best research questions come from. The second piece of advice that I have about historical research is that there are research questions everywhere, but we miss them all the time because we don't write them down. You will find when you start your classes that there are often questions that come up in class where your professor is going to say something to the effect of, you know, that hasn't really been explored much, or, you know, so-and-so has worked on that area, but it's still unsubstantiated in this way. Or there's a similar study, but it's not quite getting at what you're looking for. And I want you to pay attention to those moments and write them down. That was actually how I got to one of the questions that I was pursuing in my undergraduate research. There was a quote in an article we had to read for class that stated that enslaved people were being shipped off to the Caribbean from the North American colonies by the British. And I basically asked, you know, how many, like, how do we know this? And my professor at the time had said, you know, there's this work on Black loyalists. It hasn't really been substantiated. We don't really have data for that information because we only have this one record of those that were with the British at the end of the war. And that's what ultimately led me to my questions about runaway enslaved persons during the American Revolution. And so my recommendation is just write down your questions. Always have a place for it. Rachel asked, would you do the PhD journey all over again? If so, what would you change about it? This is a difficult question to answer because the answer requires, I think, a lot of honesty, and also makes me uncomfortable because I don't know who's going to watch this video. I'll just say it. I don't think that Yale was the right place for me. I think that if I knew what I know now, when I was applying, I would have applied to other schools. The reason is that I feel very out of place at Yale in the community. I also really struggled with the lack of kind of intellectual support of the type of project that I'm doing. While there are elements to my training at Yale that I greatly appreciate, there were others that I think were lacking. I also would probably not have started my PhD during the pandemic. I also wish that I had tried to stay at Oxford. If you've been following my channel for a long time, then you know why I didn't. I do believe that Oxford probably would have been the better place for me to do my PhD because of the advisor that I was working with at the time, and the community, and the access to archives and things of that nature. However, I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't be in this apartment. I wouldn't have met my partner. I wouldn't have, you know, the life that I have now had I made that decision back then. And while it has been incredibly difficult, I am still very incredibly grateful for my education at Yale. It is a stupid amount of privilege to have access to the materials that Yale does, to have access to the funding that Yale has, and I have my qualms with the program, with the way that Yale set up its funding, with the way it supports students and doesn't allow leave unless it's for health reasons. Like, there are so many things that I struggle with when it comes to Yale, but I am still insanely grateful for the education that I get to get. While I think I would have applied to other places, that's not to say that I wouldn't have applied to Yale. Like, I am insanely grateful for my supervisor and my committee, and I think the department has been as supportive as it administratively can. But yeah, I think I would do things a little bit differently. I'm going to end on this last question from Chris, and then I'm going to film a part 2, and I'm just going to post it for my patrons. So I'm going to end on this question because I think it's beautiful. Chris asked, when you're 90 years old, sitting on your porch with your grandchildren, what do you hope to have done, seen, experienced in your life up until that point? The thought of that makes me like really emotional. One, because I don't see myself having children, so I don't think that I'll have grandchildren. When I think about the end of my life and I think about, you know, being 90 years old, living in the English countryside, I just see, you know, looking back on a life that was filled with so much love and friendship, and I see myself sitting next to my partner, London boy, and surrounded by animals. I really hope that I become a published author of hopefully historical nonfiction as well as maybe some historical fiction in my time. I also hope that when I look back on my life, it is filled with horses. One thing that I'm really missing in my life right now is that connection to nature and that connection to animals and horses specifically. I want to look back on all the incredible books that I've read and all the places that I've seen. One thing that I really want to experience is more travel with my family. One thing that I've struggled with as an adult is that obviously I've moved very far from home, but a lot of my family just doesn't have the means to travel and to see me. And growing up, I had never left the country. We didn't travel much when I was a kid, and there were several reasons for that, but it's something that I really want to experience as an adult, but I also don't want to experience that without my family also being able to experience that. I know my mom has done a fair amount of travel around the world when she was like in her 30s. I would love for her to experience more of that. I especially want to make sure that my sister, Kaelyn, and my nephew, Wesley, get to experience the world and get to travel. In addition to, you know, having a beautiful life with a life partner, which I hope is London boy, and, you know, owning a home that feels comfortable and that feels like a safe space, and hopefully becoming an author. I also want to experience the ability and the financial freedom to not only support myself, but to also support my loved ones. Like I said, I don't plan on having children, but I do feel like this sense of familial like obligation and kind of maternal instinct towards caring for my family, for my friends, and for animals. And so I'd really like to build up such a career that I can do nice things for my sister and for my mom. And lastly, and this is where I really hope I don't cry, I really want to set up a scholarship fund. And I really want to create like a fellowship program that helps students all the way from community college through graduate school. And that really promotes humanities work, because watching it being dismantled in the United States is just something that makes me really angry, but it also makes me very sad. And I just hope that when I come to the end of my life and then I'm looking back, that I really hope that I've done things to encourage and empower students that really care, but that don't feel like they have the resources or don't feel like they have the support. I really want them to have those opportunities, because I never thought that I was smart enough to go to school. And it wasn't until I got that acceptance letter to UCLA that I started to believe that I had opportunities, that I was going to have choices. I just really hope that the future has a lot of humanities researchers in it. And so, it was a really lovely question. And Chris, thank you for asking it. So, this was a really nice Q&A. I'm actually going to film the rest of the questions for Patreon. So if you are a Patreon member, if you're a paid member of any of the tiers, then you'll have access to this exclusive video. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to do more of these Q&As in future. It's just nice to have this kind of relaxed setting to have a chat. So thank you, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you, friends.